Hello, Ashtabula and Lake County. So would you like to introduce yourself, Scott?
Sure, I'm Scott Yamamoto. I'm the Ashtabula County Auditor.
So Scott, we're here today to get some information about what is really CAUV. Could you start kind of there at that baseline?
Sure, absolutely. So CAUV stands for Current Agricultural Use Value. And what that is that's a method of taxation for farmers where instead of paying on market value, so let's say your property is worth $10,000 an acre, just for an example, instead of paying on that market value, you pay on a soil rate. So it's based on the soils that are in the ground and what the yields and what crops you can grow in those soils.
Would you like to explain a little bit about CAUV value increases? So last year, some farmers saw that the CAU value was soared up to about 300%.
Yep.
Can you explain what led to that drastic increase and how it impacted landowners financially?
Sure. So the soil rates themselves went up by 300%. So the soil rate, and again, going back to kind of just set you up. So if the market value is like $10,000, the soil rate might be $300. So a 300% in the soil rate would be $900 instead of.
That makes sense.
So you're still paying $900 instead of $10,000 an acre. So what happens is with CAUV, it's the Ohio State Extension and the Ohio Farm Bureau work together with the Ohio Department of Taxation to come up with the individual soil rates every single year. So if you're a county that is having a triennial update or you're having your 6-year full reappraisal, the state issues the county new rates.
Oh, okay.
So those new rates are based on what the market price is bringing for corn, beans, and wheat. And then they take what the cost to produce those crops is. So they take into consideration the cost of the seed, the cost of the fertilizer, the cost of the diesel fuel for the tractors. And then there's also an interest rate, and that's the cost to borrow money, right? Because that is an important thing when you're doing farming, is what is the interest rate on, some farmers have loans. So that interest rate is called a cap rate, and you divide the income by the cap rate and it comes up with a value. So those rates, if you will, it is a 5-year average. So in 2023, you would have had the previous 5 years, and those were times of historic low interest rates. And when the interest rate is very low, the value becomes very high. When the interest rate is very high, then the value becomes low. So when you had the 300% interest or 300% increase in the soil rates, what you had was, it was all those years of good interest rates and good crop prices were driving up the CAUV.
Yep, that makes sense.
That's what happened there. Now, in relationship to the 300% increase, so let's talk about what that did for the values themselves. So the savings for the farmer, and we have it on our website, and I can even show you if you'd like to see it. If you go to hover over real estate and then you go to CAUV and you click on the CAUV button, we actually have where you can see what the rates are per soil type. And we have that going back in time. And then we also calculate what the average savings is, and it's an average. So the average savings went from 80% to 70% with that 300% increase in the soil rates. So it was a 10% hit on the total value for them, but then you also had the total hit for the increase that the state ordered of 32% in the market value.
That makes sense. Yeah, and you talked a little bit with the rising interest rates, as you were mentioning, potentially leading to lower CAU values. What can farmers expect maybe in that next reassessment cycle? So 2026.
So 2026 for taxes paid in 27, taxes always run 12 months behind. So we're going to get new rates. We don't know what that's going to be yet. We will know that probably mid-2026 for the 27 bills that come out. So right now it's a little too early to tell. We know that the non-commercial timber price in CAUV has gone from like $300 some an acre back down to $230. That's going to cause the farmers that have what we call non-commercial timber is the woods that are in the back of the field. They might be, for example, my brother-in-law has a farm. He has 105 acres. He has 30 acres of tillable ground, and then he's got some woods in the back, and that is included in the CAUV. He gets that benefit. So those values are going to go back And it was because of the Farm Bureau, quite
Mhm.
honestly. They said something and said, hey, we don't really think that that was a fair thing to do. So the state has agreed to drop those back down to
Okay.
$230 an acre. So there will be a little bit of relief there for those
That's
that have non-commercial timber.
good. Okay.
But we don't. The
Yeah,
bottom line is we
you just
don't
don't know
know.
because yeah, that
But we think
timing.
that with the higher interest rates and the 5-year
Mhm.
average, there's only going to be maybe 1 year that's going to have a low interest rate in it, and the rest of
Okay.
the years. So you're looking again 5-year average. So 25, 24, 23, 22.
Mhm. So yeah, maybe there would be like significant, maybe some offset, on those increases, but we don't really
At
know,
least if it evens itself out and
Yeah.
it doesn't cause the CAUV, the savings to shrink
Yep.
more, is
Yeah.
what we're really kind of
Okay.
hoping for.
That makes sense. So some farmers, have questioned maybe whether staying in the CAUV program is still worth it after, the recent tax hikes, which
Yep.
is, explain
Right.
people, think that way for sure. What would you say to landowners who are considering kind of opting out? What would you kind of say to them about that?
So we always tell farmers that it's always a good idea to be in CAUV,
Hmm.
especially if, CAUV is for commercial agricultural production. That's the
Yes.
key words. And if that's your business, you need to stay in that program because it's still a 70% savings over just not being in
That's
CAUV.
interesting.
Not to mention the fact that if you come off a CAUV, you have to pay back 3 years worth of tax
Oh, okay.
savings.
Hmm.
That's the penalty for coming out of the
Got it.
program.
Okay. That's good to
And the more acreage you have, the bigger that penalty is going to be. And
know.
some of those penalties run in tens of thousands of
Yeah.
dollars. And we don't want to see anybody saddled with
Yeah.
that.
With Ohio Department of Natural Resources shifting forest tax program management to county auditors, how will this transition affect landowners? What do you think?
So, landowners that are in what we call Ohio Forest Tax Law,
Hmm.
the reduction there is 50% off the value for the acreage that the forester certifies. Going back to the 70%
Hmm.
savings, there's additional savings that can be harnessed by a
Oh,
farmer that is in forestry versus being in CAUV.
hmm.
So a lot of the ODNR folks are being told, hey, you might consider going on CAUV
Yep.
because your forest management plan does allow you to qualify for
Hmm. Okay.
CAUV, and it's a better discount.
This-
But then again, with forestry or Ohio Forest Tax Law, there's no penalty for coming out of the program, whereas CAUV there
There
is.
is one. Okay.
But their forest management plan, they're already doing it.
Hmm.
They're already in a management plan. They're already, and it's just that we have to learn how to do a forest management inspection.
Oh, okay.
We're
That's what.
used to
Yeah.
inspecting crops.
Yep.
We're not used to inspecting forest management plans. So that's something that we're actually working with a forester now,
Oh,
and we hire him to do a handful a year,
okay. Hmm.
but we're also learning from him, and he's teaching us how to look at a forest management
Yeah.
plan and determine whether or not it's being qualified or not.
Yeah, and that kind of goes, into my next question with under CAUV, like you said, landowners will now be subject to county inspections rather than self-certifying compliance,
Yep,
as they did under, as you just said,
correct.
ODNR's forest program. So how, like you said, how these inspections, how might they work, and what should landowners kind of do to
So
ensure compliance?
for the landowner, they're going to comply with their forest management plan,
Okay,
whatever that
whatever it
says.
is.
And all we're going to do is we're going to read the plan.
Hmm.
And if the plan calls for whatever the interval is for an inspection,
Hmm.
we will perform that inspection
Okay.
instead of ODNR.
Oh, okay.
It's it's pretty seamless for the farmers.
Oh, okay, good. They don't have to
Okay.
worry about too much of that
No,
part.
no. The only thing that they'll have to do is if they want to jump out of OFTL and,
Hmm.
and jump into CAUV, they'll have to pay the whole $25 application fee,
Yep.
and then we need a copy of their plan
Oh,
so that
okay.
we can follow it.
That sounds good. So the Farm Bureau has played a critical role in assisting farmers, as seen in Trumbull County,
Yep.
where 2 million in overpaid property taxes were refunded. How can local farmers and landowners leverage the Farm Bureau's resources to kind of navigate the CAUV and other tax-related issues?
So just like with any other program, I always recommend that if you're going to be in a program, engage with the
Hmm.
program administrator. So if the program administrator, the Farm Bureau, they have they have lobbyists,
Hmm.
they have interest groups, they can help. They helped with the Trumbull County
Hmm.
issue,
Yep.
and they also helped when I was talking about the forest, the non-commercial timber being dropped
Hmm.
back down to $230. Those are things that the Farm Bureau can do
Okay.
for the farmer. So they need to, You know, and I know it's just one more thing to do, but if you stay in contact with the county auditor's office, our CAUV administrator, you stay in contact and you're a good member of the Farm Bureau, those are powerful tools for you to make sure that the program is in your best interest and we're continuing to do things the right way.
Yeah, working together,
Yep,
like you said, through that
absolutely.
process.
Yep.
Is there anything else you would like to add? Let someone who's going through this process in on any education?
Um, just that at the auditor's office and pretty much any auditor's office in the state of Ohio, we want to be visible. We want to engage
Mhm.
with our farmers and know what's going on. If you're having a bad year, just let us know. You know, we want you to be in compliance. We don't want to take people off the program.
Yeah.
We really don't. You know, you have miscanthus, and miscanthus can't be harvested, and they don't know what to do with it, and they
Mhm.
had these leases to sign, and we don't want to take people off. So we're trying to pair people up with people, and we work with the Farm Bureau too.
Great.
If you can't farm your property, maybe somebody else can.
Mhm.
And sometimes we'll contact the Farm Bureau and say, hey, do you have somebody? We have 100 acres that we need a farmer.
Mhm.
Oh, well, we can help you with that. No problem. We reach out. So we're trying to all work together so that we have the best benefit to the taxpayer as possible.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much, Scott,
You're
for
welcome.
giving them some of this
Yep.
education and stuff if they had those questions.
Yep.
But I'll see you next time, Ashtabula and Lake County.